Hello, I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and welcome to Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. Today we discuss cannabis, kids, and Iowa's future with Dr. Bob Shreck, an Army veteran with 45 years in cancer medicine and currently in his third term on Iowa's Cannabidiol Advisory Board. He has some serious concerns about Iowa's future and interesting observations on issues of concern to the future of our children. Dr. Shreck, I thank you for joining us today. And if I may, I'll start things out by asking you to share a little bit about the special moment at the Iowa State Fair Veterans Day Parade yesterday. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. As you know, we had to delay a day because I had this previous commitment to participate in that parade. It is very special. July 5th, 2067, I was drafted into the United States Army at Fort Des Moines and ended up at Fort Campbell with a dozen other fellows from Des Moines, three of which became good friends in those 8 weeks. We all went off to serve overseas. We all came back to Iowa. We all went to work. We all raised families. And one-on-one, we had reconnected with each other, but never got the four of us together at any certain time. In 2017, exactly 50 years after being inducted, one of our members called everyone and said, I just bought a Jeep. Let's participate in the Iowa State Fair's Veterans Day Parade, which I'd never heard of. I've been going to the camping at the fair for 25 years, but I'd never heard of the parade. So we got in his Jeep and had a fantastic experience with a lot of other veterans. And we've done it every year since, except, of course, the year the fair was canceled. There was no parade. Yesterday, in many ways, I think will be the one we'll always remember. The previous 6 or 7 parades were in beautiful weather. And the longer we paraded up the Grand Concourse at the State Fair yesterday, the heavier and higher the rain became. But it was still a great turnout. We all got wet. The reviewing stand was standing there with no shelter or protection, including all our elected officials. And it was a very memorable experience, obviously.
Well, we, of course, thank you for your service. Those were times coming back to America after serving overseas were a little tougher than it is today. The military took some knocks at that time from a lot of chaos in America. And interestingly enough, where we connected was the Cannabidiol Advisory Board, of course. And that was also a big issue 50 some years ago or 60 years ago. And it's sort of resurfaced again. And you have expressed some concerns about how that has happened. What are some of your thoughts on the world as it is today?
By the way, thinking back 50 years, when I was in Vietnam, cannabis was commonly used. I wouldn't say universally used. I, for instance, despite 2 years in Vietnam, or excuse me, a year in Vietnam and 4 years in medical school, have never myself tried cannabis, not even as an experiment or as a lark. So I'm personally unaware of its effects. I just know about them, read about them, hear about them, study about them. I thought I was an experienced cannabis physician. As you recall, the Iowa law requires 7 physicians and 1 law enforcement officer, and the physicians have to have specific specialties. I represent medical oncology, the cancer specialty. And I thought I knew a lot about it because in 1986, we would hand out artificial cannabis pills. It was approved by the FDA for nausea and vomiting from chemotherapy. So I thought I knew a little bit about it. Our group of cancer doctors tried that pill. They were made to be unappetizing. They looked like little brown rabbit pellets, so they didn't look good. And we tried them for a few months. We abandoned them as a whole. We abandoned them because for 2 reasons. Number one, they were not effective for nausea and vomiting for chemotherapy. At least that was our experience. We very quickly got much more effective drugs for nausea and vomiting. And we had the occasional patient, usually a little old grandma, who would take our lowest dose and have a bad experience and come back and be angry with us about her experience. So it didn't last long. So it turns out that experience with cannabis was misleading. I knew nothing about cannabis when I joined this board. And since then, I think I've learned a lot. The board has learned a lot. The state of Iowa has learned a lot. And we've been through quite a bit here. I think we are in our 7th year, if I remember correctly, of having a medical cannabidiol program. It's a misleading term. It's really a cannabis program. It's not limited to cannabidiol or CBD. We obviously deal in THC as well. Efforts to change the name have been unsuccessful. but it's nonetheless, it continues to perform its mission. And it's been a controversial mission. As you and I have discussed, and I would consider this to be the main topic of our session today, this first session today, is that it does promote a normalization of cannabis in our society as a medicine. And of course, it's had a huge role in our society anyway already as an illegitimate drug, but it promotes normalization, which amongst our children and younger people cannot be good, cannot be good.
You know, I'd like to talk about that some more because that is something that we're looking at tremendously powered by an engine called social media, which is really making a large difference between what people believe and what the truth is. We'll see you all after the break. Stay tuned. You don't want to miss this.
Well, because it's the best. And that's true, because I've thought about that. I mean, definitely the fastest. And the biggest thing I hear most people talk about is the stability of it.
Mediacom's network is very reliable. We have a lot of programs in place that can monitor kind of issues that arise. That way we can fix them before they reach the customer.
Trust the pros. Get Extreme Internet starting at $9.99 a month for a year.
Malware and bots and worms, oh my. The wild, wild web can be a scary and complex place. And as our digital world expands, so too are the threats. Watch out, Trojan horse. That's why at Mediacom, we take security very seriously and monitor our networks around the clock to stop threats before they can affect you. Not today, rude kid. Not all internet is created equal. We build ours to keep you connected and protected.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad. I'm your host, Peter Komendowski, and we're speaking with Dr. Bob Shreck as he shares both his expert insights about the challenges of raising families healthy and safe in Iowa. As a lifelong Iowan and a grandfather, something that's important to him. Let's hear more about this cannabis sort of weariness that we're trying to develop in Iowa.
Okay. Our program here in Iowa is actually one I'm proud of because it is significantly limited. It's limited to just a few adverse conditions, some of which were imposed upon us by the legislature when they enacted the law, several of which we have added, but mainly by the dose limitations. We're limited to purchasing 90 in 90 days, 4.5 grams of THC. And that's a severe restriction compared to most states. There are states that have no restrictions whatsoever. As a result, if the patient takes the medication, which only, like any medicine, only works a matter of hours, it doesn't cure any diseases. It doesn't provide days-long relief. It wears off within 4 to 6 hours when you take it, just like arthritis medications and other medications do. But if they take it as prescribed several times a day, we hope that they avoid euphoria. We hope they avoid being stoned. Those doses are not designed to cause euphoria. In fact, the actual medical literature upon we base our program specifically states you do not need to achieve euphoria to get the medical benefit. In fact, there's a risk in doing so. You would create a market for euphoria. You would take people naive to marijuana, to THC, give them an unlimited amount. They would discover euphoria, and suddenly you've created a market, which anybody could take advantage of. Anybody who's promoting the drug could take advantage of. So we're hoping to avoid that. So taking your 50 milligrams a day or even less, the state of Utah recommends no more than 15 milligrams per day of THC. And taking that over a period of 24 hours would essentially avoid euphoria for virtually anyone. That's one of the...
So when we talk about euphoria, obviously in the vernacular of the street, it's called a high.
Yes.
We're talking, is that euphoria coincident with or directly related to the physiological effects of addiction? If we avoid euphoria, are we avoiding addiction and that whole dopamine thing? Or is that the trigger? When you're seeking euphoria, that's when you expose your brain to those risks?
I think that's exactly it. That's the case with opiates. It's a case with alcohol. It's a case with another mind-bending drug, which is cannabis. But you need to achieve euphoria to arrive at that sensation, wanting more and wanting the medicine becoming addicted. You don't need to achieve euphoria to get the medical benefits of cannabis.
Fascinating.
The other thing about our program I'm proud of is the Iowa legislature has paid a great deal of attention to what we as a board have promoted and said. They've actually turned to us on several occasions, specifically asking for advice and guidance, and they followed our advice and guidance. So has the governor. And so we've been very proud of our relationship with the legislature. We also have here, if I may say, a fantastic manufacturer, MedFarm Iowa, which has changed its name to a cuter name now called Bud and Mary, named after the owners of Chemin Industries here in Des Moines, is a world-class organization. And I'm proud of the science that they use, and I'm proud of their experience in manufacturing a quality product that is safe in doing so. They didn't make any money on it the first few years. I suspect at some point they will, or they do. We have a lot of disagreements with them currently over the role of dry, raw cannabis or weed that could then be smoked. As a physician, I don't know of any medication, any medicine for any disease in the world that is combusted. On the contrary, combustion is dangerous. We see that with cigarettes. We see that with inhaled toxic chemicals. And to administer a, quote, medication, that's air quotes, medication, by a combustible technique is something I can't imagine physicians would ever approve. And we have a physician-based board here in Iowa.
I've had my experiences with the board, and they're very well respected. But sometimes you do face some frustration, because even though the legislature listens to you, the wheels of lobbyists and all these different interests, and being at your meetings, you get a chance to see all of them. They all have sort of a viewpoint they believe is rational. They all champion certain ideas. But inevitably, your board always seems to come back to science, fact, and some degree of research. And that's a good thing.
We have to. We base our recommendations and our ideas upon review of published medicine, published articles in the medical literature, and articles that are prospective randomized controlled trials. There's not many of them done in the United States, but there are good ones done in Israel, Canada, and in Europe. So yes, and there are multiple stakeholders here, and I understand their interests. If Bud and Mary can't ultimately break even, they're not going to be a manufacturer anymore. There won't be a program, and I can understand their concerns. We try to support them as well. We try to exempt cannabis from state sales taxes. We've tried to get them to the federal government to allow them to use the banking system so they don't have to be a cash-based business. These are all just simple business things that would make sense. Currently, they can't even deduct their expenses on their federal tax returns because they're, quote, not an illegal business. If that could be done, the cost would plummet substantially. So we're proud of our relationship, and we like to honor them in the way that we can. They're a very good organization.
We need to take a short break, but stay tuned. We'll be back to continue our conversation with Dr. Bob Shreck. See you all after the break.
Dad, I'm not glitching.
I told you with our new Extreme Internet, it will be smooth streaming.
That's unbelievable.
Well, you better believe it, Missy.
I already finished streaming the whole second season of my show.
So start the third.
What the fast? That's really not frustrating.
I'll take that as a compliment.
You should.
I'm gonna get some ice cream. Do you want some?
With the drama-free reliability of Extreme Internet, you'll have to create your own. Get super fast internet with whole home Wi-Fi for as low as $24.99 a month for a year.
You told me not to talk to strangers. You told me not to cross the street without looking both ways.
You told me not to touch the stove. You told me not to do drugs. You told me not to drink and drive.
You gave me so many messages about how to stay safe. Why didn't you keep me safe by properly storing your gun?
Watching MC22 is now easier than ever before. All Mediacom customers can watch local programming online anytime. Go to mc22.net, click Watch MC22, and log in with your Mediacom account. Not a Mediacom cable subscriber? Mediacom internet or phone subscribers can watch too. Your local programming leader, MC22, online at mc22.net/watch.
Welcome back to Surviving Bad, where, like today, we often ask our guests to share their wisdom of a life well lived and a conversation about the concerns many of us share. Dr. Shreck, one of the things that's troubling in this culture is the number of people that maybe aren't getting how much doctors champion the human being, the self, the families, and all these connections. And we see so much what I call self-medication out there and a trend towards all sorts of these phases. How is it that you can assimilate that and deal with that in this society today? It's got to be a tough challenge.
Well, cancer medicine is both easier and harder. Our patients are all screened by pathologists. We get assigned pathology reports saying the patient has cancer. And they come in terrified. They come in with unknown expectations. The first thing we have to do is meet them, sit them down, talk to them long before we talk about treating the cancer. You've got to get to know the patient. For that reason, we'll bring people in within 24 hours of getting their name. We'll bring them in the same day if they'll make it. We'll make room for just to meet them and talk to them. And then we go to work on their cancer. And once we got a program defined, we got a treatment plan defined, they know where their help is going to come from. That's a great source of solace and comfort for the patient. The course may go well, they may do well. And of course, with modern cancer medicine, more and more people do well with cancer. But the advances that we've made are not so much in the ability to cure disease, although we do that. They've been made in the advantage of in the area of actually controlling the disease. So whereas when I first went into practice, literally 45 years ago, the average patient that we would see who couldn't be cured by surgery or radiation was sent to us would live months, maybe many months, but months. We were largely thanatologists. We took care of dying people. That was part of our job. Our patients now live on the average for years, sometimes many years. Now think about that. That's 10 times as long, 12 times as long. As a result, we need 10 times as many doctors. In our office alone, we have 20 physicians and 40 nurse practitioners who function as physician surrogates. At one time, we had 2, and that was way back, Tom Broker and I. But the changes have been absolutely dramatic. I'll give you an example. 9 years ago, Jimmy Carter was diagnosed melanoma, typically the most aggressive, deadly cancer there is for which we had no treatment. It was in his liver, his bones, and his brain. He's 47 days short of his 100th birthday, 9 years later, with no evidence of cancer. How was that done? With a medication called ipilimumab. It's an immunotherapy drug that had been around for a year or two. And in a certain subset of melanoma patients, the disease can be made to disappear. Unfortunately, it's a minority subset, but it's an example of dramatic changes, unbelievable changes. In 2010, the book Emperor of All Maladies was published by a fellow named Mukherjee. And I thought it was a great book, but no one would ever read it except an oncologist. Well, a year later, it won the Pulitzer Prize. I spoke to 2 different book clubs here in Des Moines about that time, about the book. It had a wide readership. And when I read it, I remember something. Mukherjee covered 60 years from the late 1970s to 2010, 60 years, 30 of which I'd been in practice. I'd seen half of this effort take place, but I'd never put it together in general terms like he did. I was focused on the individual patient, not noticing what was happening. But the changes since then, 14 years later, are enormous. Every week there's something new. If it wasn't for the computers, if it wasn't for the National Comprehensive Cancer Center Network website, we as oncologists could not keep up. Before you treat a patient or before you change a patient's treatment, you get online, you look and see what's new in the last week or month or 6 months to make certain you're not missing something. It's great.
You know, this hits close to home because a little over 10 years ago, I was diagnosed with a malignant melanoma. And I was very, very fortunate, it's not my story today, for it to be localized, for me to go through all the screening and tests that you know more about than I could ever tell anybody, and be, at this point, cancer-free. Something that wasn't spotted and diagnosed early, that had metastasized, I would have been one of those not rare people that didn't have a lot of time. And I did not, until I then became a student of cancer, because it was affecting me, I did not realize how lucky I was for modern medicine to have taken a role in that.
Well, I'm glad it was diagnosed early. You were saved, your insurance company was saved a huge expense. Jimmy Carter's medication, infused over 4 hours, once a month for 4 months, cost $30,000 per dose. And that's still the price. It really has not come down to speak of. Now, the cost of these medicines are enormous, but let me point out something. It's been 20 years since I've seen a patient who didn't get the medicine they needed, the cancer medicine they needed because of finances. And that doesn't come from excellent insurance companies. They're out there, and it comes from programs, but it largely comes from the manufacturers. They've all set up foundations. The last thing they want is somebody not getting their medication. In fact, the easiest person to get the medication for is someone who has no insurance at all. The drug company will provide those medications through our office at no cost. And of course, we can't bill for it either then. So this has been a huge step forward. If they didn't do that, they'd have people with torches and pitchforks outside the headquarters, getting ready to burn the place down. So they know how it has to be done, and they do so. They step up to the plate, and everybody gets their treatment.
So that is an important and powerful role in modern medicine. We're going to take a short break. We come back. We're going to ask you to share some final insights, comments, and maybe inspiration for those viewing to get a better understanding how to balance these risks and understand the role they have in making this world a better place for Iowa children. See you all after the break. You do not want to miss this.
I don't remember how it started.
Go to that.
Our back and forth. It always came back.
Dad!
You probably don't remember what you told me,
That was perfect.
but I heard every word.
Watching MC22 is now easier than ever before. All MediaCom customers can watch local programming online anytime. Go to mc22.net, click Watch MC22, and log in with your MediaCom account. Not a MediaCom cable subscriber? MediaCom internet or phone subscribers can watch too. Your local programming leader, MC22, online at mc22.net/watch.
Welcome back. Today on Surviving Bad, we explored cannabis, cancer, kids, and Iowa's future with Dr. Bob Shreck. He shared some serious concerns and interesting observations. Let's see what insights and inspiration Dr. Bob Shreck has to share with us. Bob, the floor is yours.
Let me share with you something that I was told my first month in practice. I moved in next door to an older physician that had actually taken care of me for many years. He took me aside and he said, Bob, he says, you're going to get your patients by referral. Cancer patients don't know where to go. For primary care, they come in off the street, but you're a specialist. They're going to come by referral. And the secret of referral medicine is to be available, affable, and able, the 3 A's. And then he pointed out a couple of things. He says, first of all, don't worry about able, because they won't be able to tell if you know what you're doing or not. That's way beyond that. Even other doctors have a hard time knowing if you know what you're doing. But they certainly can tell you if you're available, if they can find you. They can certainly tell if you're affable, if you're likable, if they can trust you, if they can establish a relationship with you. And that's extremely important. That's one of the reasons why we bring people in the minute we're called. That day, the next day, the following Monday. As you know, sometimes the patient themselves restrict coming in. They want to wait. They want to see what happens. But we're available to them the minute they're diagnosed with their cancer. For the last 20 years, the patients and families have all had our cell phone numbers. We give them out freely. We insist we take them. We take their cell phone number as well and put them on our phone. So when they call us, we know who's calling. We can collect our thoughts and think, why should they be calling, and be prepared for them. In the 20 years I've done that, I have never had a patient or family member call me inappropriately or take advantage of that access. On the contrary, I've had to chastise them on occasion for not calling me. They should have called me. Get a hold of me when that happens. Let me know. So that's all a part of cancer medicine. It's not true of every specialty. There are specialties where that's not crucial, that's not essential, but it certainly is in cancer medicine. You can imagine the panic that sets in when you're taken aside by your primary care doctor or another specialist and say, well, I'm sorry to tell you this, but it's cancer and we're going to have to get you off to somebody to help you. Well, they all want to be seen as quickly as possible, and you have to provide that. You can't introduce a delay in that process. And I'm proud to say here in central Iowa, in fact, all over Iowa, as far as I know, the system is set up to have that sort of immediate access, whether it's to a radiation therapy doctor, a cancer surgeon, or a medical oncologist like ourselves, a medical oncologist. That's been an essential part of what we do. And I've not
cancer's been a media darling in Iowa and all over the country with the relationships to alcohol, even modest use, the use of of THC-based products, especially the high risk of smoking or vaping the products because of the carcinogens and everything else. And needless to say, a continuing problem with skin cancers because people aren't wearing sunscreen. What can you tell, like, parents, adults, and people? What would you as a doctor give our viewers as advice in dealing with this high-risk landscape, whether it's cannabis or cancer?
As an estimate, but it's estimated at least 50% of cancers that are developed are subject to lifestyle or secondary to lifestyle and could be prevented. Believe it or not, I mean, alcohol is an obvious one. It's not good for gastrointestinal cancers, liver cancers, and so forth. But the big one is smoking. So in fact, smoking anything. You don't see a lot of cannabis-related lung cancers because you don't smoke 2 packs a day. But you smoke 2 packs of cigarettes a day, you're going to see it. Both my parents succumbed to lung cancer. I swear most of their friends succumbed to a smoking-related cancer, probably lost 5 or 10 years of life and had a pretty miserable ending as a result of their cigarette smoking. Now, fortunately, we've kind of won the battle against cigarettes in our society. You know, we're down to about 13% of adults that smoke. At one time, it was 60%. Alcohol, you mentioned, is a significant one. Sun exposure. Interestingly, and this is becoming more and more obvious, obesity is a risk factor for 9 different cancers. And of course, we now have 60% of our population that is overweight. Talk about an epidemic of adiposity. So as we get more and more information out to people, as they learn more and more about these lifestyles, as we develop more effective ways of intervening and educating people on lifestyle, I'm hoping we'll find less and less cancer. The ideal world would be one where someone like me is put out of business. That would be great. That would be fantastic.
You know, I'm in complete agreement with that concept, and that's a wonderful note on which to end this day. We thank you so much for sharing your ideas here with us. Look forward to having you back again. And thank you all for watching today. Check out our website at healthyiowa.org and keep your eye on MediaCom MC22 for our next episode of Surviving Bad, where we explore stories of survival, hope, and inspiration. On MediaCom MC22, your local programming leader.